A hangover is the most torturous thing in the world. If alcohol didn't bring such nasty side effects a few hours later, he would definitely enjoy drinking more, Xia Ziqing thought so as he opened his eyes crookedly on the carpet. He leaned on the sofa and barely stood up, suffering from a severe headache, took out an ibuprofen from the coffee table and ate it, took out his mobile phone and checked the time. 13:24. The memory nerves numb by alcohol finally began to run slowly. He suddenly remembered that there was Zhou Xian's film press conference at 6 o'clock tonight, and all the VIP tickets were in his hands. Of course he had to go and see it. Zhou Xian is an actor who was born as a child star. Although he is only 20 this year, he has been acting for 14 years. He was only 6 years old when he debuted. When he played the leading role in his childhood, that drama won the annual ratings champion in one fell swoop. Let him take a look. Zhi became the most popular child actor. Because of this, Zhou Xian later filmed many other film and television works, but he has always been trapped in the frame of a child star. Later, when he took the college entrance examination, he stopped acting for a few years, disappeared from the public eye, and didn't even take the art exam. Like all senior high school students, he took the ordinary National College entrance examination, and was admitted to the physics department of P University with an amazingly high score. How long the military training lasted was how long Zhou Xian stayed on the hot search. But he seems to be very low-key. After entering university, the frequency of filming has also dropped again and again. At first, the public thought that he was going to quit the entertainment industry to concentrate on his studies, but because of a group of sneak shots when he was in school, he became a hot search again. In the photo, he is participating in a school basketball game. The smooth and solid muscle lines under the red ball uniform, the sharp eyebrows that cannot be concealed by the short hair, the sweat that drops to the jawline, and the slightly frowned eyebrows when shooting, all of which are blurred by the flash. The details are so clear from the perspective of the candid shots, and each shot is full of aggressiveness. By mistake, Zhou Xian, who has always been positioned as a child star, was dubbed the walking hormone in this way. He changed his style inadvertently and took the alpha route that is popular nowadays. Not to mention high school girls who are keen on star chasing, even women a few years his senior fell into this hormonal trap without resistance. After becoming an adult, Zhou Xian almost stopped acting in TV dramas, and he didn't even take on romance films. His style of taking on dramas was very consistent, most of them were realistic themes, and even commercial ones were mostly science fiction ones. Even this drama, finally, there was a heroine, but in the end she still acted as a brother and sister, so Zhou Xian was always complained by netizens as the actor who wasted the most appearance. But even so, as long as he appears in variety shows or programs, fans and netizens can always find a lot of sub points. Xia Ziqing also went to dinner after his transformation. At that time, he was studying abroad. He happened to see the photos of Zhou Xian playing basketball. He felt that his body proportions and texture were perfect, so he suddenly wanted to show him the idea of painting, so I drew a watercolor, and posted it on Weibo. Unexpectedly, no fans found it by following the clues, and reposted it frantically, and it became so popular. He also logically became the painter in the so-called fan circle. Xia Ziqing looked in the mirror and realized that his hair was indeed a little long, and it was time to cut it. He found a rubber band tied with a paintbrush, put the paintbrush on the table with a bang, his hair casually, and picked it up from the closet. I found a white shirt and put on a black mask and went out. When he arrived at the venue, the main creative team hadn't arrived yet. Xia Ziqing took a photo and posted it on Weibo, and soon received a group of fans' comments. Gongzi Ruheng, did Mrs. Summer go too? Universe First Alpha, damn Mrs. Summer. Isn't Mrs. Summer an overseas party? It's so exciting. I am Mrs. Zhou, my god, I really want to have a face-to-face meeting with my wife yet to no man Zhou Xian. Hey, I'm also at the scene, my wife is so close to the stage, could it be a VIP? I Hung is the coolest, damn VIP? None of the station masters at Yonghung Station is so close. In order for them to cause more speculation, Xiaoziking had no choice but to pick a fan at random and reply. Tsing_summer, a ticket from a friend. Coincidentally, just after replying, he received a text message from the friend who gave the ticket Zhu Kitchen. Xi Ching, I have something to leave today, I have already greeted the organizer, sorry. It's okay, I've arrived at the scene. After Xiaoziking sent the text message, he turned the phone around with his fingers. Zhu Kitchen is a young writer, and the movie starring Zhou Ziyan this time is adapted from his novel. Coincidentally, Xiaoziking and him were high school classmates and good friends, and he was the one who gave the VIP invitation this time, but the author himself couldn't come. After waiting for half an hour without starting, Xiaoziking felt a little bored, walked out of the venue, walked through a long corridor to a side hall. The taste of this hotel is not bad, he looked at the Goya paintings hanging on the wall, they were considered fakes of relatively high quality. As he was watching, he was suddenly bumped the back, which made him barely stand still, and the cell phone he was holding fell out of his hand. Xiaoziking glanced back, behind him were several bodyguards in black uniforms, surrounded by a celebrity who was taller than the bodyguards and wearing sunglasses. Xiaoziking recognized Zhou Ziyan almost instantly. Similarly, Zhou Ziyan immediately realized the rude behavior of his bodyguard, stopped his hurried steps, bent down nimbly, picked up Xiaoziking's knocked-off mobile phone, passed it to him through the crowd, and moved smoothly. Sorry. Zhou Ziyan's voice was very steady, it didn't sound like a 20-year-old kid, and it had a strange charm between a teenager and a mature man. Surrounded by many fans, they started screaming and filmed the scene with their mobile phones. If such a heartwarming gesture is posted on Weibo, it will definitely be retweeted by everyone, and maybe even get out of the circle. This was the first time that he was so close to Zhou Ziyan. The sudden encounter was a bit unexpected, but Xiaoziking was not too nervous, and he skillfully held the smile on his face to make himself look gentle and polite. It's okay, thank you. Xiaoziking stretched out his hand and took the phone from his hand. At the same time, his cold fingertips pretended to rub next Zhou Ziyan's fingers unintentionally. About half a second. The expression on Zhou Ziyan's face didn't seem to change much. It can be said that there was no feedback. Xiaoziking could see it clearly, but he still smiled until Zhou Ziyan left and he returned to the venue. Truly a straight guy. When he entered the arena again, Zhou Ziyan's fans were giving out free support items. A 17 or 18-year-old girl stopped him and asked, "Handsome guy, whose fan are you? Do you need support items?" Xiaoziking, who was wearing a mask, smiled with crooked eyebrows and a soft voice, "Yes." The little girl opened the bag excitedly, and there were headbands, badges, bracelets, and cheering sticks inside. "Which one do you want?" Xiaoziking took a badge, said thank you gently, put the badge on his chest, and returned to his seat. The press conference started on time, the host opened the scene, and the main creators of the film also appeared one after another. The film is adapted from Zhu Kitchen's novel The Seagull. It tells the story of an unemployed young man named Uza who was deceived to Thailand when an acquaintance introduced him to a job. The story of the power to escape. Zhou Ziyan played such a young shrimp slave. In order to get closer to his image and role, Zhou Ziyan lost nearly 20 pounds. During the filming, he once appeared skinny and sick. A tattered vest and a pair of knee-length shorts that were too dirty to wash off. His face was covered with sunburn marks from years of exposure to the sea. His shoulders and back were black and red. Almost no one could recognize that this young man was Zhou Ziyan. Even the director they all nodded repeatedly, praising him as Uza himself. It has been almost half a year since the movie was finished, and Zhou Ziyan has come back a lot, and now his body has returned to his pre-filming posture under crazy fitness, with full muscles. Seeing Xiaoziking couldn't help sighing, actors are really not what ordinary people can do. If you say thin, you have to be thin, and if you say fat, you have to get back fat, like a balloon. The cropped hair he specially trimmed for the movie has also grown, but it is still quite short, with sharp facial features and deep eyes, which is different from many male stars of the same age. Most of them have gentle and delicate looks, but Jo Zion is an exception. He is not gentle, she is not handsome either, her whole body is full of male hormones, the sharpness in her silhouette can hardly be concealed, and she has a natural aggressiveness. Xia Ziking has praised Jo Zion's transformed clothing team to his friends more than once, and this time he was not disappointed. Zhi Hung wore a grey-blue shirt at the press conference last week, tucked into dark grey suit trousers, and his solid muscles were wrapped in it, with wide shoulders and narrow waist, and excellent lines, almost in the proportion of a golden inverted triangle. With a height of 1.92 meters, he is calm and outstanding. The overall attire is high-end and simple, but he wears a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. The delicate golden glasses chain goes behind the ears, shining brightly under the light, adding a sense of abstinence to his sharp-edged temperament. A woman in her 30s came by her side. She was covered in famous brands, and she was very well dressed. When she sat down, she touched Xia Ziking intentionally or unintentionally. "Excuse me." Xia Ziking looked at her and bent his eyes to show his friendliness. The other party probably seized this opportunity, and stretched out his hand with a smile. "Hello, I am Zhang Yin, the producer of this movie." Glancing at her outstretched hand covered with exquisite nail polish, Xia Ziking politely took off the mask, shook her hand. "Hello." The moment Zhang Yin took off the mask, Zhang Yin's eyes lit up, which is quite rare. After all, she has seen countless people in this circle. The young man in front of him could be described as beautiful. His facial features were a bit feminine, but he had an attractive masculine charm. The slightly long hair is half tied up, revealing a pair of extremely dark peach blossom eyes. The corners of the eyes are very delicately curved. In addition, the mole on the tip of the nose is simply the finishing touch. To put it bluntly, this person has a look that can be forgiven no matter what he does. He is non-aggressive and full of protective desire. This type is the most popular with audiences. "I haven't seen you before, it's strange." Zhang Yin let go of her hand and smiled. "You are not in the circle, are you?" Xia Ziking smiled. "The original author of this movie is my friend, and I just rely on his blessing to get close to the next star." "Oh." Zhang Yin smiled and looked at the heroine who was talking in the stands. "So you like this type of girl?" Xia Ziking laughed lightly, shook her head, and looked lazily at Jo Zion who was standing beside the heroine. "I like this type of boy. The author has something to say." "Xia Ziking, welcome everyone to my home stadium," laughs Chen Chen. "I will try my best to make a guest appearance." Zhang Yin didn't feel embarrassed. Instead she showed her original expression and smiled calmly. "My sixth sense has always been very inaccurate." Coincidentally, after the heroine on stage finished speaking, she handed the microphone to Jo Zion, and the host asked him some questions about the movie. "Just now we saw some clips in the pre-release trailer. Zion, your breakthrough this time is really super big. I almost didn't recognize it when I saw it for the first time. We are all very curious. Do you have any impression of this movie? Deep things or feelings or something?" Jo Zion held the microphone, thought for a while, and replied, "If I feel it, I don't really want to eat fish and shrimp in about half a year." All the fans in the audience laughed. This kind of serious cold humor was unexpectedly suitable for him. "I was impressed. Actually, I was very impressed with the whole process of filming this movie. To be honest, it was the first time I tried this kind of subject matter, and director Wang has obsessive-compulsive disorder for real shooting. 80% of the shots are we took the real shot on the boat. At the beginning, my seasickness reaction was quite serious. I couldn't enter the state for a long time. The whole group was very tired and very depressed. When I think that there is such a thing in the world, I am deprived, human rights become slaves, I feel very..." Jo Zion thought about the wording, sad. Yes, Probably this kind of mood supported me to finish filming this movie. I think the whole cast and crew are like this bar. Xiaoziking tilted his head slightly to look at him, listening carefully. To be honest, he has always felt that Zhou Ziyan is very unsuitable for the entertainment industry. He is like a product of a sterile environment, and he has a heart to save any dangerous and complicated environment outside. To put it bluntly, he is an idealist suffering from redemption paranoia. This is the first time he has seen Zhou Ziyan so close. Now he understands why those star chaser girls are so fanatical to see a real person. For such a good-looking star, the scene will only look better. Staring at Zhou Ziyan on the stage, Xiaoziking felt that every angle of him was almost perfect, and he could completely replace those plasters that lacked texture and texture as a tool for others to practice sketching. Occupational diseases made him subconsciously scan and analyze every inch of Zhou Ziyan's skin and muscles through the clothes covering his body. Xiaoziking, who has read countless people, always believes that Zhou Ziyan's body is the most perfect he has ever seen. I really want to create a sculpture based on him. Xiaoziking sighed in his heart. Then let's start the questioning session from the audience. The host handed the microphone to Zhou Ziyan. You come first, Ziyan. The fans started to scream with all their might, and the atmosphere at the scene became very enthusiastic for a while. Zhou Ziyan narrowed his eyes slightly. This small gesture was very pleasing to Xiaoziking. On stage and off stage, the eyes of two people meet. The corners of Xiaoziking's mouth were slightly raised, and the corners of his eyes were also slightly raised, habitually conveying information in his eyes. That's it. Zhou Ziyan pointed in his direction. This girl in a floral skirt. He added. It turned out to be the girl behind him. Xiaoziking smiled. Boring straight guy. Half of the glances were sent, but he was blocked by the opponent's straight male wall. This kind of unfavorable start did not make him feel depressed, but instead aroused a fire in his stomach. Probably the same as the hunter who competes in the deer, the more agile the target is, the better the gun in his hand will be. He didn't listen much to the questions and answers between them. He just observed the texture lines of his body with his eyes presumptuously and restrainedly, as if he was looking at a perfect sculpture in an art gallery, full of longing and imagination. The press conference lasted for 2 hours. After the show ended, Xiaoziking went to the bathroom. The venue was a high-end hotel with a very complicated structure. Xiaoziking searched around but couldn't find it. When he met a staff member on the way, he smiled and said, "Hi, do you know where the restroom is?" The staff member was a young girl, and she was a little embarrassed when she saw Xiaoziking. Turn right, oh no, turn left and there is a VIP restroom at the end. Thank you. Xiaoziking tilted his head, smiled sweetly, and put his hands in his pockets towards the direction she said. As soon as he walked in, the phone rang. Xiaoziking glanced at the caller ID and frowned. After playing all night, I really don't feel tired. If I remember correctly, we haven't even started. Xiaoziking washed his hands with the mobile phone under his shoulder. I don't think there is anything wrong with me, do you? Do you want to fall in love with me? He chuckled lightly, shook off the drops of water on his hands, took a few sheets from the paper box beside him, and wiped his fingers carefully. I remember when we first met, I said that I would not talk. Falling in love is just because you look like me, and you go out to drink and drink when you have nothing to do. Who knows that I found you after a few words. His tale dragged on for a long time, as if he was hesitating in words. After hesitating for too long, his tone became completely cold, and he slowly said word by word, 1, nothing, yes, place. The other party kept talking on the other end of the phone, and Xiaoziking was tired of talking. Are you serious? Don't be ridiculous. I'm most afraid of hearing someone tell me that I'm serious. It's all nonsense. I think I'm a bitter drama girl, the main character. Obviously she was flirting with others in the bar yesterday, so she was so far away from doing things with people on the spot. Now I still have the face to express my sincerity. They're all grown-ups, and if they eat well, maybe they can sit down and have a drink together next time we meet. We're all not fuel-efficient lamps. With this skill, we're already hooking up with fresh and warm people. What's the trouble with me here? My son. He shook his hand. The voice on the other end of the phone suddenly became louder, making his ears hurt from the noise. He frowned and took it with his hand, without a trace of smile on his face. Even the voice has changed. I warn you, stay away. He rolled up the paper that he had wiped his hands with before, and threw it into the trash can. If you talk nonsense, I'll find someone to dispose of that thing under you right now. It's just lying on the bed and being by someone, so it's useless to keep it. The person on the phone suddenly fell silent. Xiaoziking laughed, looked at himself in the mirror, adjusted his expression, and smiled softly. Don't be nervous, I'm just kidding. How can I bear it? His voice became extremely gentle again, leaning against the wall of the bathroom, as if comforting his intimate little lover. So be good and disappear from my eyes, okay? After hanging up the phone, Xiaoziking was about to go in to use the bathroom, but he didn't expect a person to come out of it. In a grey-blue shirt, with a tall figure, he was the actor Zhou Ziyan who was shining on the stage before. Fuck, overturned. Xiaoziking, whose true face was broken, did not panic. He calmly and even gracefully showed Zhou Ziyan an angelic smile. Coincidence? Zhou Ziyan frowned slightly, looking at Xiaoziking's expression with unconcealed disgust. No, it's not that he couldn't conceal it, actors are best at concealing emotions. He didn't even bother to hide his disgust. Zhou Ziyan glanced down, and saw the silver badge on Xiaoziking's chest that symbolized his fan status. Xiaoziking noticed this look, and he took a look himself, reached out to touch the badge, and said with a smile, well, you read that right, I'm your fan. Zhou Ziyan walked around him indifferently, went to the sink and turned on the faucet. Xiaoziking shrugged, entered the compartment, and closed the door with his feet. Disliked by idols, missteps, missteps. If he plays normally, he will never show his feet when they first meet, and it is really handy for him to pretend to be a close and friendly image. After all, the so-called little angels are more friendly. Who makes people always give up their trust to seemingly kind people at will? This time it was really bad luck. Xiaoziking disgustedly dragged the guy who was addicted to harassment into the blacklist. Forget it, I wasn't a serious fan in the first place, I just regarded him as an object of sexual fantasy. Being hated by one's idol is not considered a special kind of care. Xiaoziking thought so mockingly, closed the door with a bang, and walked to the huge mirror to take a look. The gentle and kind person in the mirror was not him at all. Coming out of the bathroom, he left the venue directly. Who knew that Xiaoziking, who stayed in the bar until 3:30 in the morning the next day, received another call from Su Kitchen. Xi Ching, you're on the trending searches. The music in the bar was blaring. Xiaoziking came out frowning, squatted on the side of the road in a daze. His tongue was numb from drinking. What did you say? You are trending on Weibo. It seems that someone uploaded the video of the press conference, and you appeared on the scene. Su Kitchen spoke quite calmly, but Xiaoziking knew very well that he was such a calm person, and after he briefly said a few words to Su Kitchen, he sat down on the side of the curb, with the cold wind blowing on his face in the early morning, and then a little sober. Xiaoziking frowned and opened Weibo, and found the hot search page. The first item on the hot search list has a few large characters written on it. Seagull Conference white shirt brother white shirt? Xiaoziking tried his best to recall how he dressed last night. It seems to be wearing a white shirt. He clicked on the entry and looked at it. The most forwarded video was the Q&A session between Zhou Ziyan and fans at the press conference. The camera switched from Zhou Ziyan on stage to the lucky fans off stage, who was behind Xiaoziking during this process. The camera stayed on Xiaoziking's face for a few seconds, and in just a few seconds, Xiaoziking was directly on the trending searches. He suddenly remembered that he was too careless for not putting on the mask after taking it off. This video has almost tens of thousands of comments. It's watermelon, not winter melon. I want to get all the information about this little brother within 10 minutes. Vicky, Mom, I saw an angel, tears filled my eyes. JPG Yangu has no human rights. Fuck, this kind of good looks can't make a debut? This looks too good looking, and the long hair is also good looking. A fairy is a fairy. 33 is my wife, a pure passerby. This shot is simply amazing. She smiles like an angel, and looks better than a lot of fresh meat. I hung is the main attack. The little brother is really handsome, but if I read correctly, isn't he wearing the Hung family's support badge on his chest? With screenshots First Lady Zhou Ziyan, it is the support of the Hung family. Fuck, little brother is my Hung fan. I'm sorry I lowered the average appearance of Hung fans kneeling the universe's most a Zhou Ziyan. Fuck me, Heng's family really loves idols. This kind of face is killing many idols now. I'm really embarrassing to Heng's family, crying loudly eating melon. Xiaoming, these days, those who are not good looking are ashamed to chase stars. While flipping through the comments, there was a man standing in front of him. Xia Ziking's shadow fell on him, and he lazily raised his head. Is a good-looking man. The other party smiled and lit a cigarette. No companion. Xia Ziking blinked slowly. For some reason, he was not interested at all. He raised his eyebrows and said coldly, "Do you think I look like someone without a partner?" After speaking, he stood up and prepared to leave. The man was a little surprised. He didn't expect this handsome man to stand up so tall, but he still stretched out his hand and tugged him, and said with a smile, "Don't rush away, it's not embarrassing at this time, I'll buy you a drink." The other person's face was completely old-handed. Xia Ziking swept his eyes, then raised the corners of his mouth, and immediately changed his expression, showing a provocative attitude, and put his finger on the man's shoulder. "Drinking is so boring, handsome guy, I am 20,000 an hour, so, you are a new customer, how about a discount of 16,000? The man immediately frowned, "You must be sick." "I'm not sick." Xia Ziking smiled slightly, "I'm clean, do you want to see the medical report?" 20,000? How dare you say it? The man looked him up, "What about your being inlaid with gold?" Seeing him like this, Xia Ziking's eyes immediately turned cold, and he spit out a few words that did not match his appearance, and even his voice became low, "I'm JB with diamonds." Lighting a cigarette for himself, his expression changed from teasing to a ruffian in an instant, and he looked up at the other party in the grey-white smoke. "I have no money, so why should I talk to you if you don't have money? Just strip off on the bed and put money on him. I'm going, I have to think about it." "You." There was a trace of displeasure on the other party's face, but it seemed that he still didn't intend to give up. Xia Ziking got annoyed, took out his wallet, took a few banknotes from it and stuffed them into the man's left breast pocket. "Here." The man frowned, "What are you doing?" Xia Ziking took a puff of cigarette and spit the smoke on his face. "Buy a quiet place. If you are really not satisfied with your desire, use this money to have some fun." "You." The other party was stunned. His neck was thrown back, and when he lowered his head again, his face was full of impatience. "Still leaving?" The person who approached him for a while was at a loss for words. Xia Ziking didn't even look at him, straightened his suit, and left without looking back. If such a self-righteous person does not completely destroy his poor self-confidence that is like a bubble, he can pester him endlessly. Xia Ziking walked across a street, stopped a taxi and got in. On the way home, Xia Ziking continued to look at the previous Weibo. The video was indeed released by the official movie blog, and the netizens were indeed discussing it spontaneously, but he always felt that there would be capital involved in this matter in the later stage. Take this opportunity to hype. Thinking of this, he became a little unhappy. He went back to the apartment he temporarily rented after returning to China, took a hot bath, and fell asleep on the bed. Sure enough, Xiaoziking, who fell asleep until the next afternoon, woke up to find that his cell phone, which had been turned to silent, had received more than 40 missed calls. He flipped through it, and even his parents, who didn't have a phone call during the holidays, called. At this moment, he even felt a little bit of fun. Now that he is so popular now, he is forced to appear in the sight of everyone, including the two parents who have no feelings for him. It's also quite an accomplishment. After tidying up, Xiaoziking casually his forehead hair, put a small bra on the top of his head, then changed into a dirty overalls, and sat in front of the drawing board, with the mottled paint palette in hand, red and blue mixed together, blending into a dirty grey-purple. He closed his eyes, and Zhou Xian's disdainful expression appeared in front of him that night. Like floating clouds, those images gradually slipped into my mind from the clouds of memory and became clear. Xiaoziking caught it with lines and bound it on the drawing paper. The three-dimensional outline, the sharp eyebrows and eyes, and the slightly pursed lip line because of disgust, are all painted on the plain plane by the heavy color of the oil painting, and there is nowhere to escape. Holding the pen, Xiaoziking leaned against the back of the chair and stepped on the edge of the tool table with one leg crossed, carefully studying this somewhat random sketch. I can't tell where I am dissatisfied. The demeanor fitted by the lines is always less than 1/10,000th of the charm of a real person, and even the degree of disgust cannot be imitated. The phone rang again, and Xiaoziking stretched his arm enough, and took it in his hand. It's an unknown number. May I ask who you are? He was habitually falsely friendly. We met before. I wonder if you still remember me. The other party's voice was indeed familiar. Xiaoziking only reacted for a second or two before recalling, "Ah, you are Miss Zhang. Yes, you have a really good memory." Zhang Yin on the other end of the phone laughed, "Have you been troubled recently? You have become popular all over the internet." Xiaoziking smiled and stretched, "Fortunately, I have been sleeping, and you are the first call I received." Zhang Yin was a little surprised. This young man was so calm that he didn't even ask how she got the contact information. It was dusk when the two of them made an appointment, and there were very few people in the coffee shop. The orange sunlight penetrated through the transparent floor-to-ceiling windows and melted into the strong aroma of coffee, wrapping Xiaoziking inside. Zhang Yin pinched the coffee spoon with her fingers to stir up the shape of the milk foam, and looked at the young man in front of her. His dark hair was dyed with a warm halo by the setting sun. There was a smile on his delicate face. The small mole on the tip of his nose was gentle and charming. I didn't notice it last time. It turned out that there was a long and thin scar on his chin, is about to coincide with the mandible line, so it is not easy to find. Xiaoziking was more casual than she imagined, only wearing a dirty grey overalls, big and old, with stained paint all over it, new and old. However, Zhang Yin immediately recognized the brand of the clothes. This trendy brand is quite expensive. It is a brand that many celebrities favor when they are engaged in the so-called airport fashion. Did you paint just now? Yeah. Xiaoziking looked down at his palm, and there was a large piece of dark blue paint on the outside. He rubbed it with his fingers, but couldn't get it off. He couldn't help feeling a little annoyed, and said without raising his head, You want to ask me out?" Seeing that he was so straightforward, Zhang Yin didn't make any more polite remarks, and said straight to the point, "You never thought about making a debut?" Xiaoziking tapped the wall of the coffee cup with his fingers, and looked at the people coming and going outside the window. "Debut? Your qualifications are really good, and you are very popular with the audience. You can see it in this hot search." Zhang Yin subconsciously put on the posture of a gold medal agent. "Actually, in our opinion, artists are also divided into grades. The second thing is that no matter how hard you try, you can't get attention. People like this are the majority of people in this circle. The better ones can get ahead if they take their time, hone their acting skills, or wait for an opportunity. There will always be a time when Xiaohong, the last type, is the talented player, who has a fire in his life, even if he doesn't say a word, as long as he has a camera, he can get a lot of attention. Zhang Yin leaned forward, "You are the last type." A child walked by outside, holding a hydrogen balloon in his hand. One didn't hold it tightly, and let it fly away. The child stared blankly at the sky, and suddenly cried out. Xia Ziking looked at it and couldn't help laughing. Feeling that Zhang Yin, who was being ignored, coughed, Xia Ziking lazily turned her head and looked at her. "Miss Zhang, you are definitely an expert in this circle, but no matter how powerful an expert is, there will be times when you are mistaken." "What's the meaning?" "You are mistaken now." Xia Ziking leaned back on the sofa, too lazy to hide it. "I am not the last type. Let me tell you directly, I am a trouble." His eyes were full of smiles, black pupils. The warm light from the window flows inside. "You'll regret it, if you pull me into this circle, I'll just keep making trouble for you." Zhang Yin looked at him for a long time before she spoke again. "You don't want to debut, I understand. I still have plan B." Xia Ziking raised his eyebrows. Since he was bored anyway, why not just listen? "Tell me." "Recently there is a reality show that requires amateurs to participate." Zhang Yin took out a plan from her bag and handed it to Xia Ziking. "I also participated in the production of this reality show, and I want to invite you to participate." "Invite me?" Xia Ziking opened the plan and saw a few words before finally understanding. "So you are planning for Zhou Ziyan, this is actually your plan A. You're really the smartest person I've ever met." Zhang Yin didn't hide her real motivation. "I guessed that you wouldn't agree to debut, and you would definitely be rejected if you said it. You just want to try. You should know, I am the shareholders of Ziyan's brokerage company, of course, have a deeper relationship than the shareholders. I am inconvenient to say now. Ziyan is an artist that our company is currently promoting. His acting skills and conditions are very good, but you also know that there is usually a problem with the debut of child stars, that is, the lack of loyal fans. His nationality has always been very high, but now this circle is no longer the era of relying on nationality to exchange resources. You need flow." Xia Ziking poked a layer of milk foam on the surface with a coffee spoon. "That's right." Zhang Yin tapped her fingers on the table. "With Ziyan's acting skills and appearance, if there is more traffic, he will become an absolute phenomenon. This is what I want." Xia Ziking understood her purpose, but he found it interesting. "Then you think I can bring traffic to him? Otherwise I wouldn't come to you. You have to know that traffic comes from topics. To put it bluntly, the fastest way is to fry CP. Frying CP is popular, but I think it's very strange. Zhou Ziyan also has a lot of CP, and many of them are popular young meat. Why did you find me, an amateur?" Although Xia Ziking asked this question, he also knew very well in his heart that the uneven distribution of benefits brought about by the hype among celebrities would often lead to bigger problems. An amateur like him who has no fan base and no company operations is more suitable to come to cooperate. "Now you bring your own topic. You are the amateur with the most attention right now. Just by looking at the trending searches in the past few days, you can know the potential of your face." Zhang Yin said flatteringly. This real person. The original planning of the show was to escape from the real-life secret room, but I rejected it because it lacked topicality. There have been similar shows before, but they were all confused. Sometimes the audience just want to watch the really interesting ones. For example, Xia Ziking propped his chin with his hand and smiled lazily. For example, a star and her fans are trapped in the same secret room, trying to escape. Zhang Yin propped her chin with her hands, and looked at Xia Ziking with a smile. If this fan is also a handsome guy, then I guess those little girls will more interested. I see. So yesterday's trending topic on Weibo was bought by you, right? With a bang, the coffee spoon he was holding fell against the wall of the cup, and Xia Ziking withdrew his fingers. Zhang Yin, who was exposed by him, didn't think there was anything wrong, and replied calmly, "I just added fuel to the flames after you were on the hot search." But I want to clarify in advance that the video was released at first. It was an accident. In fact, when I met you, I guessed that you would be noticed, but I didn't expect it to be so exaggerated. So just use it. It's a terrible occupational disease. I don't know how the beneficiary felt when he knew about it. Speaking of the beneficiary, Zhou Xian's extremely disgusted expression could not help but appear in his mind again. Xia Ziking suddenly sat up straight with great interest, put his hand on his chin and smiled at her. Your proposal is indeed quite interesting, but you probably don't know that my idol hates me very much now. The word very much was deliberately elongated by him, and he squinted his eyes and smiled as if he was very proud. Zhang Yan didn't quite understand. Have you met in private? How could he hate you? He treats fans very well. Well, I met it accidentally in private, how should I put it? The situation was too embarrassing. Xia Ziking couldn't think of any suitable explanation for a while, so he had to give up. It just happened like this. I bet you that if he knew it's me, I will definitely not agree to be on this show. Zhang Yan was silent for a while. What if I convince him? Will you come? Xia Ziking, who was staring at the paint on his fingertips, raised his head, his eyes glowed with joy. Come on. His ending sound was also very light, which made Zhang Yan curious, which was really straightforward. Really? Zhang Yan showed a suspicious expression on her face. It's a bit strange that you agree with me so quickly. Xia Ziking fiddled with the delicate sugar cube box at hand, took out a piece from it, put it in his mouth, and crunched it before it melted. Really, I agree. When he thought of the scene where Zhou Xian obviously hated him and had to live with him, he felt excited. Excitement is the source of creative desire. By the way, are you sure you want to invite me to a reality show that requires IQ? Xia Ziking raised his eyebrows. What if I can't help at all and just drag Zhou Xian down? Xia Ziking's statement was not groundless. He was also a fan of Zhou Xian, and knew him somewhat. Zhou Xian resolutely gave up the art school for the college entrance examination and went to the physics department of P University, which shocked Xia Ziking. He didn't expect that this little child star turned out to be a man with a high IQ in science. He thought he would give up his career in the entertainment industry and join the society. The road of socialist scientific research, who knows, will come out to take on the show later. If you don't go to the so-called class, you can still perform well. When God opens a door to a person, there is a high probability that all his windows will be opened, or there will be no cracks at all, and it will be as dark as a closed room. The reality is so cruel. That's what I thought at first. It's enough for Xian to be smart, and it's better for you to set him off by the side. Zhang Yan smiled, not hiding her original calculations, but I still investigated you, occupational disease well, I was really surprised. You are from the Florence Academy of Fine Arts? Ah yes, I accidentally saw the record of your previous participation in High MCM. Careless? This woman is horrible. Although Xia Ziking's face was calm, she sincerely admired her investigative ability in her heart. Participating in the mathematical modeling competition was only a matter of high school, and she was still able to find out. I think someone like you will definitely not be the one who is holding back. Zhang Yan looked at Xia Ziking with a half smile, and Xia Ziking also returned a false smile. I will try my best. After bidding farewell to Zhang Yan, Xia Ziking decided to go find Su Kitchen. On the way, he passed a newly opened cake shop and bought a few new cakes. So you really want to be on TV? Su Kitchen asked vaguely with a bit of surprise, with the cake in his mouth. Xia Ziking, who was sitting on the ground, nodded, stretched out his long legs, and crossed them together. He couldn't help complaining, is it too old-fashioned to say that I'm going on TV? I'm going to participate in a reality show. It's all the same. Su Kitchen ate too fast, choked a little, got off the sofa and ran to the refrigerator to find a drink. Xia Ziking looked at his back and clicked his tongue. You are barefoot again, you haven't been talked about by Xia Zhigzu enough. After finishing speaking, he glanced at the milk box with no aesthetics, and couldn't help asking, "Is there any wine?" "Drink less bars, your Xia family either smokes or drinks, a bunch of bad habits." Su Kitchen stuffed the milk into his hand. Xia Ziking reluctantly took the milk, and looked at Su Kitchen with a smirk on his face. "I'm ashamed to say, that kid's biggest bad habit in his life is you. You're the one with the bad habit." Su Kitchen said casually, "Don't laugh, it's your turn sooner or later." Xia Ziking shrugged, "Then let's see which unlucky ghost has my bad habit." Su Kitchen thought about the reality show. Why did the producer find you? There seem to be very few such deciphering reality shows, and guests are generally not easy to invite. I don't know where that person found the record of me participating in competitions with Xia Zhigzu and the others, plus the hot search last time. Xia Ziking pinched the milk carton with a headache. "That's why I said I hate the internet." But having said that, Su Kitchen, who didn't think it was a big deal to watch the excitement, smiled and leaned on the sofa pillow. "If you participated in that show, you would be able to get in close contact with your idol." "It's not an idol, it's the object of sexual fantasies." Xia Ziking got excited when he mentioned this. "It's the main point. If I put it aside beforehand, I don't think I would agree. Every move will be recorded by the machine. It feels pretty good." "Disgusting. But now Zhou Ziyan seems to dislike me very much, which is interesting." Su Kitchen was a little baffled. He didn't understand what his VIP ticket had brought about, let alone what was going on in Xia Ziking's mind. "Being disliked by the person you like, you still feel excited? Aren't you shaking S? Why do I think you are shaking M?" Xia Ziking laughed, and pinched Su Kitchen's face. "Chen Chen, you are too naive. Don't you think it's very difficult to look at someone who hates you and be forced to suppress your emotions, and to work together and even get along with you under the camera? Interesting." In fact, he hesitated for a while when he worded it. The original reserve player was sexy. In his mind, Zhou Ziyan endured his loathing for himself and was forced to show an unassuming intimacy. That scene was really sexy. It makes people want to do everything possible to provoke the bottom line of his pretense. It was already late when I got home, and another strange call came in on my mobile phone. Xia Ziking answered it casually, only to find that the other party turned out to be his stepmother. Xia Ziking couldn't think of any convincing reason to call him at this time. "Xi Qing, you didn't say anything when you returned home." The other party's voice was as hypocritical as ever. Xia Ziking turned the phone on speakerphone and put it aside. "If I knew you were coming back from Florence, I should have said in advance that your father and I would send someone to pick you up. Now we all have to see you on the TV news. It's really not easy." Her voice was as slippery as fish, with the fishy smell sticking to his hands. "You are also the son of the Xia family, it's not good to stay outside all the time, and what TV is on, give more to your father." Xia Ziking snorted coldly, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of ice water for himself, unscrewed it and took a few big gulps. The cold water flowed into the lungs, and all internal organs were cold. "Have you said enough? Mrs. Xia, the dove occupying the magpie's nest." The other party obviously hesitated for a while, and when he spoke again, he lost a lot of confidence. "Why are you so aggressive? I also care about you." "Aggressive?" Xia Ziking slammed the refrigerator door. "You have been merciful to me for so long, what exactly do you want to do? Let me think about it. Is my mother's property going to be transferred? Or is Xia Yongkai going to separate the family?" "You. It seems to be true." Xia Ziking smiled. "If you have the time to pretend to be with me, you might as well beg your husband to let him stop messing around outside and make more illegitimate children to share the family property with your son. My suggestion is pertinent enough, right?" "You." Xia Ziking saw through the other party's every word and deed, and she couldn't help turning into anger from embarrassment. She tore up all the love and tenderness she had pretended before. "You shameless rascal, you're with your father, you, you, all day long just know how to mess around outside. If he doesn't mess around, how can you enter Xia's house? Xia Ziking's tone was extremely gentle, you have to be grateful. The other party cursed again, and it was nothing more than a few words, you and your father are shameless libertines, you will not end well. Xia Ziking has never heard bad words since childhood, and has long been used to it. Waiting quietly for her to finish showing her shrew face, Xia Ziking put the bottle in his hand back on the table, turned his back to the counter, and finally spoke again. No. The person at the other end of the conversation was stunned. What did you say? Breathing is not smooth, bored. Xia Xi unbuttoned the first button of his shirt with his hands, and reiterated again, I said, I am not the same as Xia Yongkai. This is a little more comfortable. He women, I men. Before going to bed, Xia Ziking habitually checked his Weibo account. At first, this account was only used to share his paintings, but in the end it evolved into a star-chasing account. Why so much news? He was taken aback. Although as the most well-known painter in the circle, he was also sought after by some fans on weekdays, but this time there were so many new news that Weibo almost got stuck. Xia Ziking quit and restarted, and it became normal. Little rabbit is obedient, Tsing is big. You are the little brother in the white shirt, right? President Hung, please support me positively, damn it, is it really a big touch in summer? No way? Was discovered? Xia Ziking frowned suspiciously and scrolled through the comments. Sure enough, they were all messages from Hung fans, and there were countless private messages, almost all of which were about the press conference a few days ago. Sure enough, it was picked up, the internet is really a thing that people can't hide. Instead of letting these fans guess here and there, it's better to just explode yourself. Xia Ziking, who was in a broken jar mentality, turned on the camera casually, and took a picture of his own face. The distance was too close, and the undried hair after taking a shower was scattered in front of his face, and the angle from bottom to top was also very weird. He took a look, and he barely looked like himself, so he hastily posted the photo on Weibo. Tsing_summer, share pictures. The moment it was sent, the vibration of the phone didn't stop, new news kept pouring out, and the excitement of the fans almost poured out of the screen, directly hitting his face. Universe number 1A. So handsome. The looks of Heng's fans are incredible. It's a watermelon, not a winter melon, I'm so beautiful, the mole on the tip of my nose is so beautiful without me. Xiao Tu obediently, the skin is good, the nose is so straight, the eyelashes are so long, you can hold such a tricky angle, you really are a fan of the gods kneeling First Lady Zhou Ziyan. Before, I always thought that summer was a painting of a fairy, but now I know that you are a fairy yourself. It's hard work crying tears. The only Hung Prom other fan on the whole network. My mom has such good looks, why does she need to rely on talent? Soon, Xia Ziking's Weibo became popular. His Weibo ID has once again entered the forefront of the hot search list, and he has become a new internet celebrity that netizens talk about. There are a lot of job invitations and even signing invitations in private messages. This era is extremely exaggerated, and a good appearance has become the most direct and superficial shortcut to progress in life. The phone vibrated again. Why don't you come to the company to find me when you return to China? Go home on the weekend, I have something to tell you. Dad, the darkness in the room was like a clammy quilt, wrapping Xia Ziking in it, making it impossible to breathe. I don't have that free time to go to your house, so call me if you need anything. After sending the text message, Xia Ziking went to the windowsill and lit a cigarette. The grey smoke mixed with the soft and indifferent moonlight penetrated into the gaps in the brain to fill the vacancy, making the consciousness blurred. Like the majority of netizens, Zhou Ziyan, who was doing makeup and hair for the magazine cover, also checked Weibo. On the day when Xia Ziking became famous overnight, Zhou Ziyan was almost certain that he would pretend to be a fan to gain popularity just to enter the entertainment circle, and then buy some hot searches or something to hype and gain a wave of fans. It's easy to become popular in this age when looks are in power. But hearing Zhang Yan say that he is unwilling to sign a contract to make a debut, Zhou Ziyan was a little confused again. Could it be that he is really just a fan? So, Zhou Ziyan, who was taking a break from his busy schedule, went to the Weibo account, clicked on the trending search and found Xia Ziking's Fanquan account. It turned out that he was really a fan and a painter. However, Xia Ziking hardly knows how to post on Weibo, nor does he repost pictures of himself in various scenes like other fans. He just silently posts his paintings. His painting style is very unique, and he can perfect the texture of the human body with just a few strokes. It is clearly outlined, and the strong hormonal impact conveyed by the painting can be felt across the screen. When flipping through his Weibo, Zhou Ziyan also looked at the reposts on Weibo, and found that the fans, apart from bragging that Xia Ziking is a fairy painter, all of them were "My hung a exploded. I can't close my legs. Lie flat and begging the sun" and so on. Cough, what's wrong with the little girls now? The fingers that slid the screen unconsciously accelerated, and suddenly a painting flashed in front of him. He couldn't help but stop, and flipped up again. That picture was once popular. It showed a silhouette of him laying up in 3 steps, the shadows scattered on his body cut by the sun, the slender fingers clutching the basketball, the red sweat-soaked jersey, and the tightness all over his body. Muscle texture. He exited the Weibo interface, opened his photo album, and found this painting in an album named Fanart. He had never noticed that there was a handwritten signature in the lower right corner of the painting Tsing. It turned out that I had seen his paintings, and even kept them to show off to my friends. Zhou Ziyan, who withdrew from the account, hesitated all night, but finally did not delete the painting from his phone. But there was always something wrong in my heart. Probably wanting to take advantage of the popularity, the reality show mentioned by Zhang Yan finished the long-awaited planning work in a hurry, finalized the list of stars and amateurs for recording, and started recording on Saturday. On Friday, Xia Ziking checked into the arranged hotel at the request of the program team. In the evening, Zhang Yan took the time to come to the hotel to see him. "Are you so afraid of me running away?" Xia Ziking wore only a pair of cotton trousers, sat cross-legged on the bed, and wiped his wet hair. Zhang Yan took a look. His abdominal muscles were clearly defined, which was obviously the result of long-term exercise. They were not very strong, they could only be called lean, but they still didn't match that pretty face to some extent, which made her feel uncomfortable. "I was a little surprised, but I just put the document in my hand on the table calmly. That's right. Here are some information about the program, you have time to read it. Is there a script?" Xia Ziking stretched his neck and put on a loose t-shirt, looking like a high school student. "Let me tell you first, I won't follow your script, so don't treat me what to expect." Zhang Yan's expression was a little helpless, but she seemed to have guessed it. "I knew it would be like this. In fact, there is a script, but this script has nothing to do with you, it is a secret room plot specially hired by the program team." After finishing speaking, she changed the subject. "Although the script has nothing to do with you, we still arranged the character design, and we need you to get closer. Anyway, aren't you very good at disguising?" This woman always speaks straight to the point. Xia Ziking is almost used to it. "I see." He stretched out his long legs, threw the towel on the chair beside him, folded his hands behind his head, and leaned back against the wall. The tone was loose. "Tell me, what kind of character design did you make for me?" Zhang Yan sat at the table in a leisurely manner. "Think about it, since Ziyan's transformation, his popularity has soared, so the company must want to continue his aggressive setting. Then if we want to go to CP, what do you think? What kind of person should be matched with, who will be easier to get angry?" Xia Ziking, who was leaning on the bed, stared at Zhang Yan. His slowly blinking eyes were like a slow motion that was constantly zooming in, and a clean smile that was harmless to humans and animals began to appear on his face, and the mole on the tip of his nose added a little bit to him. Innocence. Angel character design. Suitable for all ages, children and old people are not deceived. Zhang Yin shrugged, smart. He sneered, completely different from the gentle look just now, filled with disdain for a moment. You seem to have decided to attack or suffer without authorization. Xia Ziking bent one leg, put his arm on his knee, propped his chin with his palm, and looked at Zhang Yin with unclear eyes. It's not, Xian's character design is, of course, it all depends on what netizens think. Zhang Yin was a little flustered at first, she didn't expect Xia Ziking to raise this question, but when she said this, she suddenly felt that although the person is beautiful, his aura is really powerful. Although Xia Ziking didn't hide her true character in front of Zhang Yin, she didn't know Xia Ziking's romantic style, let alone that he was always top, so she could only attribute his words about offense and show an innate desire for power. That's it doesn't matter. Xia Ziking's mouth curled up, and his eyes softened again, I'm easy to talk to. In just a few minutes, the expression on Xia Ziking's face changed again and again, and Zhang Yin was amazed at seeing it. It would be useless not to act with such a talent. Although she had learned Xia Ziking's ability, she didn't know why he would agreeing to her invitation so simply. You agreed to participate in the show without even asking how much you will be paid. It doesn't matter how much he cares. Xia Ziking suddenly fell back on the bed, don't worry, I can't guarantee anything else, the topic will definitely satisfy you. He suddenly remembered something, turned over and lay on his side, looking at Zhang Yin, however, Zhou Ziyan probably won't recognize the persona you gave me. It's okay, I will communicate with him. He has been acting for so long anyway, so he won't be in a hurry to tear down the stage. Xia Ziking raised his eyebrows, always feeling that things were not as simple as Zhang Yin thought. On the second day, Xia Ziking went to the recording site very early. He was taken to the dressing room by the staff to clean up briefly. The makeup artist was a young girl. Although she was used to seeing beautiful stars, she was still surprised to see Xia Ziking. After a while, he asked him about maintenance secrets while putting on makeup. A young assistant named Zhi Chu entered the dressing room. Xia Ziking smiled at the hairy boy in the mirror, who was a little embarrassed and scratched the back of his head and said, Mr. Assistant, you can come to me for anything you need during the recording of the show. I feel that only elderly people are called Mr. Xia Ziking showed his best gentle expression, I should look quite small. Ah? No, no. No. Xia Ziking smiled with eyebrows and eyes crooked like a crescent moon. Ah, I mean. I'm sorry, you look like a college student. I'm new here and I'm a little nervous. Zhi Chu waved his hand quickly, that. Just call me Xi Ching. The so-called makeup is nothing more than a primer and eyebrow drawing, which is much faster than expected. Xia Ziking stood up, turned around and shook hands with Zhi Chu. I am 25 years old, and I should be younger than you. Bigger, but I have to trouble you to take care of me these days. Ah, then I'll call you Brother Ziking. Zhi Chu held Xia Ziking's slender hand with both hands. I also have a lot of things I don't understand, please bear with me. So honest. Xia Ziking was surprised inwardly, this was pretty good. He thought Zhang Yin would put in a slick eyeliner, but it seems he was overthinking. The recording was scheduled in the evening. In the morning, Zhi Chu took Xia Ziking into the studio to take a group of promotional photos. After entering the studio, Xia Ziking met two other guests who also came to participate in the recording. I understand, he knows both guests, one is Sen Sen, the solo female lead singer whose popularity has skyrocketed recently, and the other is Shang Siryui, a member of the recently popular boy group High Five. Am I the only amateur? Xia Ziking turned to ask Zhi Chu. Zhi Chu nodded, then shook his head again, no, there is another amateur girl who is said to be a member of the Mensa Club. Xia Ziking nodded, and was quickly called to take pictures. Unlike ordinary amateurs, Xiaoziking was not afraid of the camera. The photographer first took a few photos to try, and after confirming the preview, he found that it was not bad. He was a little surprised. Have you ever been a model before? That's right. Xiaoziking recalled his weird experience of being a model for a friend from the School of Fashion Design in Fome to shoot a blockbuster of clothing. It's completely amateur. Very good, your limbs are very long, and you are also photogenic. The photographer took a few more photos, and then officially started shooting promotional photos according to the requirements of the program. When shooting the last set, Xiaoziking saw a tall figure enter the studio. Zion is here. There was almost no need to distinguish, his radar scanned Zhou Zion in an instant, not to mention his dignified face as an actor, he couldn't find another one just because of his tall stature. Long time no see. Xiaoziking turned his eyes back to the camera and smiled. The author has something to say, reader, I want to reverse CP. Zhou Zion, cover mouth no, you don't want to. My next chapter will be officially launched, everyone hold on tight. Little uncle, so what if you go online, are you still teased by me? Shrugged Zhou Zion, everyone in the comment area who is shouting against CP, you are all locked by the law of true fragrance. Seemingly rushing over from another event, Zhou Zion, who was wearing a grey-green jacket, walked in a hurry, and greeted the surrounding staff after entering the door. Sorry for being late. The white hood concealed half of his face, revealing only a pair of deep-set eyes. Zhi Hung is here. He is very popular, and he often recorded the programs of this TV station before, and the staff who came and went liked him very much. Zhou Zion is just a 20-year-old young man, and he is like a younger brother to most people in this circle. It's just that his usually too strong aura makes people always ignore his age. The makeup artist pulled him aside to do makeup and hair. Last night, he was filming for a magazine until the wee hours of the morning, and then rushed to promote the movie early in the morning. Zhou Zion, who was severely sleep-deprived, closed his eyes and asked the stylist to dry his hair to catch up on sleep. Zia Heng's clothes look good today. The makeup artist's sister smiled softly. Insufficient rest caused the brain's reaction to be slow. Zhou Zion opened his eyes and answered honestly, this set is sponsored by the brand. Pfft. The makeup artist laughed and sprayed him with setting spray, you're still so real. Seeing that his condition was really bad, his assistant Xiao Luo hurried to buy a cup of iced coffee. Just in time, Zhou Zion had finished his styling and was waiting for the filming of the promotional video. He took the coffee, said thank you, and walked out of the dressing room. Walking around the studio area and coming to the semi-open rest area, Zhou Zion took 2 sips of coffee and put it aside, stretched his long legs and sat on the sofa beside him, tilted his head and looked around, his eyes glanced around, he watched everything, but deliberately avoided Xiaoziking, who was the most central in the spotlight. Okay, Xi Qing can do it. Xiaoziking thanked him, and glanced at Zhou Zion. The other party was nestled on the sofa, and the collar of the jacket was pulled up to cover half of his face, only showing a pair of beautiful eyes and tightly frowning eyebrows. The words unhappy were written in vain. Why is it so funny? This person seems to have been dragged here by force. Xiaoziking walked over, it was fine if he didn't leave, but as soon as he got closer, he clearly saw the other party's frown deepened. Don't want me to sit here? Xiaoziking raised his eyebrows, sat down directly next to Zhou Zion, and smiled at him with his head tilted, still saying the same words from the unexpected meeting last time. What a coincidence! Xiaoziking narrowed his eyes, even if the person in front of him knew his face, he still looked natural and harmless. You also participate in this show? Zhou Zion looked up speechlessly, then moved to the side, thinking that you are still pretending to me here. Although he knew it in his heart, he didn't say a word, his head was turned to the other side, and he was cold, as if he couldn't see Xiaoziking. Xiaoziking didn't feel embarrassed when his hot face was put on a cold butt, on the contrary, he found Zhou Zion more interesting than he imagined. He smiled and leaned on the sofa, stretching out his long legs wrapped in suit pants. Not only did Zhou Ziyan not want to see him, he didn't even want to hear him talk. He took out his mobile phone and earphones from his jacket, and was about to stuff them into his ears when he heard Xia Ziking speak. "You treat your fans like this, be careful if I turn off fans and step on them." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Zhou Ziyan's hand holding the earphone stop, hesitated for a while, and finally turned around slightly to look at him. "The word fan is really easy to use." Xia Ziking secretly laughed in his heart. The two looked at each other for a while without embarrassment, before Zhou Ziyan finally spoke, probably out of respect. He unzipped the zipper on the stand collar and said solemnly, "I'm not targeting you, I just don't like treat people who are not emotionally specific." Xia Ziking was stunned for half a second. This? Where did this fairy little angel come from, with a face that was born to be an alpha scumbag, and he was so honest in his bones? He smiled, his lips curled up like a cunning cat. "How do you know that I'm not single-minded about my feelings?" Zhou Ziyan's brows didn't relax at all, instead they were furrowed deeper. He remembered the day when he met Xia Ziking in the bathroom. This seemingly non-aggressive person said such vicious words. Seeing the complex expression on Zhou Ziyan's face, Xia Ziking suddenly became serious, his eyes showed sincerity, and he sincerely defended himself. "Really, I'm not what you think, you misunderstood. That day the matter is very complicated, I can't tell for a while, that person is not my partner, he has been pestering me for a long time, and he hangs out with other people besides me. I was really forced to say those words to scare me scaring him. For a person like me who is easy to bully, it is too easy to suffer if he doesn't say something cruel." His lips were pursed, his face was a little frustrated and wronged, he raised his hand and touched his chin. "The tip of the nose, I've been really uncomfortable these few days. I'm clearly the one being harassed, and yet I'm considered a scum by my idol." The word idol is easy to use, and Zhou Ziyan's expression softened significantly. Xia Ziking sighed, his eyes were innocent and wronged. "I swear to you, I am definitely not the kind of person who does not treat feelings exclusively. It's just that once you feel that the other party really likes you, you will want to run away. He only likes the excitement of chasing others, and his focus on challenging difficult problems is almost pathological. Once the challenge is completed, the previous dry fire is poured with cold water and extinguished cleanly." He looked into Zhou Ziyan's eyes with an expression so sincere that even professional actors couldn't tell the real from the fake, without fear of any scrutiny. "I really, really like you, and I have drawn a lot of pictures." Seeing Zhou Ziyan's brows stretched slightly, the suspicion in his eyes became less. Xia Ziking stretched out his hand to him. "The first meeting was so embarrassing and caused a misunderstanding. I'm really sorry. Let's get to know each other again." Zhou Ziyan folded his arms and hugged his chest, and he was not very willing to reach out. His eyes swept over Xia Ziking's body, hesitated for a long time, and finally compromised. He thought of the painting Xia Ziking drew. The temperature of the two hands overlapped together, and there was a wonderful sense of fusion. "My name is Xia Ziking." Zhou Ziyan's chin nodded slightly, and his superior jawline stretched the muscles of his side neck, although the fan in front of him must know his name, but out of politeness, he still briefly reported his family name, Zhou Ziyan. After speaking, I was about to pull my hand out, but felt that the other party was holding my hand hard, and looked up at him with some doubts, but saw Xia Ziking smiling. "Hey, don't you ask me what my name is?" Word. This man is really strange. Zhou Ziyan raised his chin slightly, and a trace of impatience began to appear in his expression. This expression made him look extraordinarily attractive, but he still maintained his last patience. "Which words?" "Xi is learning, Qing." Before he could finish speaking, the slender hand holding Zhou Ziyan's palm caught off guard and brought him over mechanically. The distance of defense and defense was shortened rapidly under his pull. Zhou Ziyan's dark brown pupils dilated slightly, and almost bumped into that seemingly innocent face. "Heathen, leaving only an invisible distance between the tip of his nose. The scent of perfume on Xia Ziking's body replaced him as the most cunning intruder, pouring in, spreading, and occupying the high ground. The brief closeness is like a lens that has been slowed down infinitely, turning into a frame of light and shadow. The distance is too close, even the breath of the nose is ambiguous, the spicy pepper, the thick tobacco and the sweet musk are all rolled up, which makes Zhou Ziyan frown, but when the acceptance reaches the end, he senses a subtle sweetness taste, unbiased drill into the breath, into the lungs. In the complex aroma, came the same ambiguous breath, spreading from the corner of his smiling mouth. It's unclear. Xia Ziking let go of his hand, the left corner of his mouth curled up, his eyes were full of mischief. He was clearly defending his own morality last second, but this second he was revealing his true colors maliciously. Absolutely, absolutely can no longer trust this face. The author has something to say, Zhou Ziyan, never let him succeed next time. Make a fist Xia Ziking, then do you think I'm delicious? Wei Xiao Zhou Ziyan, farewell. The prototype of the perfume is Dirty Talk by Orange. Xia Ziking originally thought that the so-called escape room to a reality show is to set up a semi-open recording studio, throw the guests in it, and a lot of VJs will follow. Everyone can perform the escape room step by step according to the script. Unexpectedly, things were not as he thought at all. Without being told what kind of secret room it was, they were blindfolded with a black cloth and taken to a certain place. Please don't talk, everyone. I felt like I was carried by two people for a long time, and then I was arranged to sit on a chair, thinking that this was the end, but I didn't expect the other party to tie him up firmly with a rope, unable to move, vaguely hearing the sound of metal colliding, his wrist felt cold. His hands were handcuffed and bent over his chest. If it wasn't for sure that it was a program recording, Xia Ziking would have suspected that he had been kidnapped. He now understands what the director has been saying just now, this show is all about realism, and the staff will never interfere, so we don't know what will happen to everyone here. Zhou Ziyan vaguely heard the footsteps of several people. His hands were tied with ropes, hanging above his knees, and his ankles were tightly bound, making him unable to move. Just when he was wondering, the black cloth on his eyes was removed by the staff. The sudden clarity of vision brought him a strong sense of discomfort. Zhou Ziyan narrowed his eyes slightly. In front of me is a closed room, which is different from many escape rooms with a terrifying atmosphere. The field of vision here is quite bright, and the roof casts a dim light. However, except for the 2 rows of bookshelves against the wall, many of the furniture are dark. Covered with a white cloth, it looks a little strange. But none of this was enough to surprise him. Because the scene in front of me at this moment is more unexpected than the secret room. Xia Ziking, who was joking with himself in the studio 2 hours ago, is now tied to another chair, and the distance between the two is less than half a meter. I don't know if it is to cater to the effect of the previous internet popularity. Under the arrangement of the program group, Xia Ziking is still wearing a white shirt and black suit pants this time, his eyes are covered with black cloth, and a strand of hair on his forehead is from the half-tied hair. Escaping from the air, it hangs on the side of his face, and the fine strands of hair brush against his thin and delicate jawline. With the brilliance of his eyes wiped away by the black cloth, the little mole on the tip of his nose became more prominent, making him helpless and well-behaved. Although Zhou Ziyan is very clear, these 2 words do not belong to him. The handcuffs around his wrists had a cold metallic luster under the dim light, and his wrist bones were slightly raised, as if they could collide with metal to make a crisp sound. The rope was like a winding snake, wrapping around his body tightly, as if you could see the traces of muscles under the fabric. The cover of the black cloth prevented Zhou Ziyan from seeing those frivolous eyes. It seemed that this was the first time he had unscrupulously observed the man in front of him, this man who was hypocritical and cunning in his heart. He looks a little pitiful, Zhou Ziyan thought from the bottom of his heart, or in other words, people have a weird desire to make him more pitiful. I don't know why, but at this moment, I can suddenly understand the psychology of some people with special hobbies. The game has officially started. A voice with a slightly metallic texture emerged from the top of his head through the voice changer, interrupting Zhou Ziyan's delusion that grew wildly like weeds in his mind. Welcome everyone to Escape from the Sky. Now, please forget your original identities. In this game, you are the players trapped in the secret room. Please note that the secret room here is not just one, but there are many interlinked rooms, which means that when you open the door of your secret room, you will enter a new secret room, where there may be people trapped like you. Escape all the secret rooms and leave this room in the shortest possible time. The person with the highest number of points will be the winner of the game, and the points earned by the rest of the players will be calculated according to the escape time, and every 10 minutes will be reduced by 1 point. It's really enough for the second grade. Xia Ziqing smiled, but the notification sound did not end. There is one thing that needs to be specifically stated. The biggest difference in Get Out is that this is not a simple escape room reality show. There is a killer among the many players. Unlike ordinary players, he needs to hide his identity and has the right to kill death players. The points of the killed players will be cleared in this round, and the killer can only kill one player in a program. Of course, ordinary players can also use reasoning and judgment to find out the killer in your mind. When players gather together, they can be killed by voting. Once the killer becomes the final winner, every ordinary player in the game is equivalent to death. The points for this round will be cleared, and the killer will get double integral. During the game, you need to make full use of your ingenuity to think and reason. If you encounter a puzzle that you can't solve, you can advance the time to exchange clues. This means that your escape time will increase and your points will decrease accordingly. The player with the highest total points will become the champion of this season's program and receive a mysterious prize. Each of you does not have any equipment to assist decryption. There is only a modified mobile phone. This mobile phone has 4 functions. First, receive information from the program group. Second, advance time to buy clues. Third, in the first player start timing after customs clearance. Fourth, submit the list of killer suspects and complete the secret ballot execution. Note, players cannot use mobile phones to communicate with each other, you can only communicate on the spot, if you want. The rules are introduced. The voice paused, followed by 3 ticks that sounded like a clock counting down. 3, 2, 1. Now, the game begins. Hearing these words, Xia Ziqing breathed a sigh of relief, slumped on the chair, and threw his head back. Zhou Ziyan watched his every move, and understood that he must not know his existence now, and such peeping seemed aboveboard. Although in Zhou Ziyan's moral view, such an approach is not worth encouraging, but Xia Ziqing is an exception. He is insidious and cunning, has no shame or lower limit, and he has never met a similar person, so when facing him, Zhou Ziyan is used to some behavioral patterns will always fail uncontrollably. Xia Ziqing tried to reach the black cloth on his eyes with his hands, but his arms were completely entangled and he couldn't lift them up. After several attempts, he failed. He couldn't help but sighed, and said softly to himself, "You can see everything. Don't see, are you waiting to die in the first issue?" Zhou Ziyan wanted to laugh a little. For some reason, observing Xia Ziqing now seemed to have diluted the urgency of escaping from the secret room. He couldn't see at all, and couldn't move his hands and feet. Xia Ziqing could only lightly touch the ground with his heels, leaning his head back, lazily leaning on the chair, and didn't speak. The room was quiet, eerily quiet. Zhou Ziyan deliberately did not make a sound, obviously he was also trapped, and helping each other is the best policy, not to mention that they are still recording a program, so they can't go on like this forever, but now he just wants to watch Xia Ziqing's jokes. Probably because he is really bad, so in Zhou Ziyan's heart, such a person deserves to be punished. An illusion of doing justice for the sky. What he never expected was that the man who was so lazy before that he almost gave up struggling suddenly sat up straight, facing Zhou Ziyan so straight, as if the eyes covered by the black cloth could be seen through. Barrier, staring at him intently. That's right, watching him. Zhou Ziyan frowned, he was sure that he did not reveal any sound. Suddenly, Xia Ziking's head tilted, and the corner of his mouth raised a very gentle arc. Help me take off the blindfold. Impossible. He obviously couldn't see it. Hearing Xia Ziking's words, Zhou Ziyan froze for a moment. Although he still didn't speak, his quick heartbeat couldn't fool anyone. He narrowed his eyes slightly, seeing Xia Ziking in front of him still facing him so straightly. After a stalemate for a while, he asked again, "Is your mouth sealed?" "That's okay, can you help me take this piece of cloth?" "Just take it off." Xia Ziking's tone was so firm that it was almost impossible to refuse. Zhou Ziyan turned his neck and thought for a while in silence. To be honest, he didn't want to talk to this person at all. But, they have been so frozen, neither of them can get out, not to mention that this is recording a program, so it can't be difficult for the program crew. After struggling for a while, Zhou Ziyan had no choice but to choose to give up watching the good show. With his feet on the ground, he turned the office swivel chair he was sitting on vigorously, so that his body faced the long table. A white porcelain vase with a bouquet of white chrysanthemums was placed very close to it. Zhou Ziyan stretched out his bound hands with great difficulty to reach the vase. Finally, his fingers grasped the neck of the bottle, and with a bang, he decisively smashed the vase against the table. Zhou Ziyan raised his leg, stepped on the edge of the table with the sole of his boot, kicked hard, and slid the chair to Xia Ziking's side. "I can untie the blindfold for you, and in exchange, you have to untie the rope for me." It can be regarded as being a real dog to him for several years. Xia Ziking instantly recognized Zhou Ziyan's voice, which was completely in line with his previous expectations. He smiled. "No problem." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Ziyan stretched his bound hands behind his head, took off the cloth that blocked his sight, and threw it aside. His vision changed from being temporarily blurred to clear. Xia Ziking turned his face to the side, only to realize that the two of them were very close. He could almost smell Zhou Ziyan's faint scent of aftershave. Xia Ziking half closed his restored eyes, the expression on his face ranged from ignorance to surprise, flowing smoothly without any flaws. "So I was trapped with you." Xia Ziking smiled sweetly, his eyes were shining brightly, and the mole on the tip of his nose made him look even more innocent. "It feels like a dream, I'm a little dizzy now." Dizzy. It's so good at pretending that even he, a professional actor, has to admire him. Zhou Ziyan couldn't figure out why there was no sense of disobedience with this kind of smile on this person. If they hadn't seen his true face, I am afraid few people would not be deceived by him. This secret room is full of cameras, and every corner can be clearly photographed. He didn't want to be accused of being indifferent to fans, so Zhou Ziyan had no choice but to respond with a smile that seemed warm enough, and even softened his voice. "My eyes are also covered by the blindfold, and I was surprised when I took it off." Zhou Ziyan had no choice but to deal with him patiently due to his self-esteem as an actor and Zhang Yin's advice, even though he really didn't like this kind of people. He handed the sharp piece of broken porcelain in his hand to Xia Ziking. "I'm sorry to trouble you. Don't worry, I've liked you since a long time ago. I've watched every movie you made." Xia Ziking took the broken porcelain awkwardly with his handcuffed hands, half bent down and broke it for Zhou Zihoning rope. Zhou Ziyan smiled emotionlessly, "Thank you. Two people who are good at disguising come and go and make hypocritical moves." "The rope is not easy to cut," Xia Ziking said slowly while doing it. "Oh, did you just say the rules just once? I'm still a little confused." Only then did Zhou Ziyan withdraw from his memories. He didn't hear what Xia Ziking said, so in order to ease the embarrassment, he had no choice but to say something else. "By the way, how did you know that someone would take off the blindfold for you just now?" Xia Ziking guessed that he would ask this sentence. Now there are only the two of them here, and Zhou Ziyan fully understands his true colors. If he is not honest, he will lose more trust and cause trouble for the rest of the game. It would be better to be open and honest. The pair of drawing hands cut the rope vigorously. Xia Ziking stared intently at the gradually disconnected rope, and explained softly, although this is the first time for me to be on the show, I used to often hang out with my friends. Playing the escape room together is also considered a bit of experience. When you come to this kind of place, you can't have too much sense of substitution. You must always think from the perspective of those planners. He cut one and pulled out the disconnected rope with his hands. They put me here in the hope that I could escape, not really want to keep me here for the whole episode. If only a person is in this room, his hands and feet are trapped, and he can't even see his eyes. The possibility of escaping by himself is almost zero. There are only two situations for such a long time. First, he waits for others to escape from his room, come to my room, save me or kill me. Second, there is another person in this room, and we need to help each other, from a viewability standpoint. Having said that, Xia Ziking raised his head slightly, and met Zhou Xian's eyes. He didn't say anything, just looked at him silently for 3 seconds. Then suddenly raised the corner of his mouth. For a moment, Zhou Xian had a weird illusion, as if he could hear what he hadn't finished speaking. They had just known each other for a few days, and there was no such word as tacit understanding, but from this look, he completely understood Xia Ziking's implication. From the perspective of program viewing, only you and I have the highest degree of topicality. I just wanted to try the second possibility, but I didn't expect to be so lucky and hit it once. Lying again. At some point, Xia Ziking had already released Zhou Xian's hands. All right. Thank you. Zhou Xian was still in a daze. He thought he was a smart person, but his extremely bad first impression made him lose his ability to judge the person in front of him. If he wants to win the game, he must lose his prejudice. When he came to his senses, Zhou Xian noticed that Xia Ziking actually bent down and used his handcuffed hands to untie the rope on his ankle. His hands are now free, and he can completely untie the knot by himself, without the need for violent unlocking methods such as broken porcelain pieces, and without the help of others. I will do it myself. Before he finished speaking, he saw Xia Ziking, who was still bent over, raised his head. His eyes were a little puzzled, his slightly red lips were holding the piece of porcelain that cut the rope just now, and his white shirt was exposed from the oversized neckline. Raised collarbone. The eyes that were freed from the black cloth, the hair that was a little longer, the angle of the leaning body, the posture that was close to Zhou Xian's knees. Handcuffs, moles on the tip of the nose, sharp fragments, beautiful but ruthless lip lines, nibbling the tips of the porcelain tiles. The weird atmosphere sets off these broken elements into a strange painting, which is very strange, and a little ambiguous paint is accidentally rubbed on it. Zhou Xian didn't understand why he suddenly felt embarrassed. He had never experienced this feeling before. He hurriedly bent down and reached out to untie his legs. People are always subconsciously afraid of the unknown. Xia Ziking didn't care, but just took off the ceramic piece he was holding with his fingers and handed it to Zhou Xian. It seems to be a few dead knots, try this. But the other party just shook his head and untied a knot with a little difficulty. Seeing that he didn't appreciate it, Xia Ziking had no choice but to straighten up, and threw the broken porcelain neatly to a corner of the room, like throwing a dart. Zhou Xian, who untied his hands and feet, regained the most basic freedom. At least he got out of this swivel chair. The scene just now made him feel uncomfortable. No matter what, he had to attribute this feeling to the sequelae of being restrained. Turning his neck, his fists were clenched so that he could relax a bit. However, Xia Ziking's hands were still handcuffed, and he couldn't release the restraint on his legs by his own ability. It's a pity that he only exchanged one condition for taking off the black cloth. Now that Zhou Xian is so benevolent, he can be allowed to become a victim of the game here, not to mention that he hates himself so much. Xia Ziking thought about the countermeasures in his heart. This was recording a program. It is reasonable to say that the practice of directly abandoning his companions is too tricky, and ordinary celebrities would not choose such behaviors. However, this program has the particularity of psychological warfare. The hidden killer role will make there is a natural mutual suspicion between people, and they cannot be called companions at all. So even if Zhou Ziyan left him here at this moment, it was completely logical. In fact, Zhou Ziyan was also thinking about it. To be honest, his moral values made him unable to just abandon someone like this, even if it was just a simulated survival game. But he really didn't like Xia Ziqing. He was a big trouble, a ticking time bomb. If he is saved now, maybe at some point he will betray himself. Smiling like an angel and pushing him into the abyss, this is Xia Ziqing. For a brief moment, both were struggling and weighing. Although you are my fan, this is in the game. I can't be sure if the program team will do some tricks to lower my vigilance. As Xia Ziqing thought, Zhou Ziyan found something for himself after abandoning him. It is the most difficult rhetoric to be criticized by the audience, but even if the audience is really dissatisfied with it, it doesn't matter, because he really doesn't want to be with Xia Ziqing. If you are a killer, then I will be a slave to a tiger. What if you are? Xia Ziqing originally wanted to ask him this question, but he took it back before he opened his mouth, because such words were too direct and conflicted with his harmless person design. There is really no way. Having made enough mental preparations, Zhou Ziyan turned around frankly, but the moment he stepped forward, his calf was hooked by a foot. Don't go! Looking back, Xia Ziqing, who was sitting on the chair, looked into his eyes. Zhou Ziyan felt very strange, obviously belonged to such a cunning body, why these eyes could always make the most pure and unbearable look. Ziyan, form an alliance with me, I will unconditionally help you win. Xia Ziqing laughed. The expression on his face was so confident that he didn't look like a person who was asking for help, but rather like someone holding the best bargaining chip negotiator. Really? But in this kind of game? Zhou Ziyan raised his eyebrows at him. The rule of winning is not to trust anyone. Quite smart, Xia Ziqing laughed. I didn't make you believe me. His abyss-black pupils revealed a sweet and seductive light. I let you use me. The author has something to say, Xia Ziqing. This child is so pure that my skills have completely failed. Zhou Ziyan, actually, it's not completely. Whispering BB. When he knelt down on one knee to help Xia Ziqing untie the rope on his leg, Zhou Ziyan himself didn't know what was going on, why he was bewitched by this person, and why he was not firm enough to agree to his request. None of this is logical. Maybe it was because he was recording a show, he had already made a request to himself, and it would be bad to refuse. Zhou Ziyan found a step for himself. Thank you. Xia Ziqing's ending sounded very pleasant, even though his hands were still handcuffed. He stood up from the chair, moved his ankles with his toes on the floor, and turned his head to observe the room by the way. Zhou Ziyan took off all the white cloths in the room and put them in a corner. This room is not too big, but judging by the furnishings, it is a decent study room. The door they are most concerned about has a code lock, and the door can be opened by entering the correct 4-digit code through the touch screen. In the room, the 4 walls are covered with light brown wallpaper with dark patterns, several paintings are hung on it, and there is an oval mirror with a wooden frame. On the right side of the mirror is a mahogany cabinet against the wall with a gramophone on it. On top of it was a vinyl record. These were not the focus of Xia Ziqing's attention. He carefully looked for the distribution of cameras in this room. After all, it is a reality show, and all the puzzles are arranged, so there must be a close-up of the decryption process with a camera. After roughly counting the cameras, Xia Ziqing felt a lot clearer. Occupational diseases made him look at the paintings hanging on the wall, and Zhou Ziyan followed, but he wanted to check whether there were any clues behind the paintings. What do you think of this painting? Hearing Xia Ziqing's voice, Zhou Ziyan's hand holding the picture frame paused. Art has never been his specialty. Although he has acted since he was a child, there is still a big gap between the expression forms of painting art and performing art. I don't know much about these things. Zhou Ziyan still said the truth. Xia Ziking smiled. This is Goya's painting, the Dressed Maha. This painting actually has a very interesting story. Zhou Ziyan put the painting back and took a look at him. In fact, he was not interested in the story Xia Ziking said, but then he remembered that it was being recorded, and it seemed not good not to speak, so he reluctantly agreed. What story? Spain in the 18th century was shrouded in asceticism due to historical reasons, and no images were allowed in the artworks of the entire country. The only piece of Venus in the mirror was protected under the protection of the king. He was punished. Xia Ziking stretched out his still handcuffed hands and slowly touched the edge of the picture frame, and Zhou Ziyan looked at the woman in the picture lying on the dark green velvet bed with some puzzlement. A hazy white gauze dress, with a wide rose-colored belt around the waist, outlines the soft waist. She's wearing. Xia Ziking paused his hands, glanced at Zhou Ziyan, the tails of his beautiful eyes slightly raised. She didn't wear it at first. It is said that this woman is a noble concubine in Spain, and Goya was ordered to draw a full-length portrait of her. As he spoke, Xia Ziking suddenly chuckled, who knew that he was completely fascinated by the beauty, and drew a portrait. After the incident was revealed, the dignitary was very angry. In order to calm his anger, Goya drew the same clothed horse Ha. Both paintings were taken away in the end. Zhou Ziyan frowned slightly, looked at the woman in the painting, but didn't say a word. Xia Ziking put down his handcuffed hands and looked sideways at Zhou Ziyan. Are you imagining another one? Hearing this, Zhou Ziyan frowned and looked at him like a little tiger with all its fur standing on end. I don't. Xia Ziking nodded with a smile, and replied softly, I'm just kidding. Not a joke at all. Seeing the fake smile on his face, Zhou Ziyan was even more displeased. This guy really has no shame. Zhou Ziyan left without hesitation, walked straight to the long table before, and checked the clues on the table. Xia Ziking still stood where he was, staring blankly at the paintings on the wall. Why did you put this one up? After standing for a few minutes, Xia Ziking turned around and found that Zhou Ziyan was standing by the long desk on which his back was leaning, looking intently at the desk. He also walked over. On the desk was a thick book and a blanket-torn sticky note. It's so shredded, the props team really worked hard. Xia Ziking teased in a gentle tone as he looked at the snowflake-like pieces. Zhou Ziyan flipped through the book in silence, and a bookmark came out with a line written on it. Whatever I touch breaks. Kafka. Xia Ziking came over, selected poems of Kafka. Feeling Xia Ziking approaching him, Zhou Ziyan felt a little uncomfortable, put the book aside, picked up a small piece of it, turned it over, looked at it, frowned for a moment, then said nothing, and began to spell out one by one. Xia Ziking didn't like to do this kind of piecemeal work. He walked to the phonograph, brushed his fingers lightly over the tone arm of the phonograph, and gently placed the stylus on the record. The unique ethereal feeling of vinyl records quickly penetrated into this dull closed space with the fast-paced notes. Xia Ziking leaned against the cabinet and looked at the equally dull young man. Have you ever heard this song? Zhou Ziyan didn't look up, but focused on the desktop. I'm not very good at music. He has no interest in art, and he has no affection for artistic libertines. Xia Ziking smiled. Although his hands were handcuffed, he stood in front of the mahogany cabinet like a professional music connoisseur and admired it for a while before slowly saying, "This is the composition of Ravel's piano suite Mirror." The first song was inspired by Moths in the Dark. He turned his head, looked at the slowly rotating record, and chuckled. Although music critics think that this kind of fine halftone is very similar to its fluttering butterfly wings, but it sounds like a shattered mirror to me. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a little regretful. It seemed that he shouldn't have said so much on the show, but Zhou Ziyan, who had been putting together the fragments before, suddenly raised his head and looked at Xia Ziking. Perhaps because he thought his analogy was quite appropriate, Zhou Ziyan, who was originally focused on nothing else, was also distracted by the endlessly flowing music, trying to appreciate this piece. He didn't straighten up until the broken note was recovered without error. Finished? You are so good. Xia Ziking was a little surprised. The sticky notes were full of broken letters, and the fragments were so many and broken that it gave him a headache when he was impatient. As he spoke, he walked to the desk, where Zhou Ziyan was pasting these fragments into a complete piece of paper with scotch tape on the desk. He glanced at it, and all the letters on the sticky note appeared and were restored, but it was a sequence of letters in disorder. Pgohudian Nerd, obviously it's a password. Xia Ziking frowned slightly. He was more curious now, how Zhou Ziyan put the pile of pieces together so quickly. It's so fast, how did you fight? Zhou Ziyan turned the piece of paper over, and a complete sentence was written on the reverse side, in beautiful handwriting. See you at Sophia's restaurant at 10 o'clock tonight. The information on the back is much easier to restore than the information on the front. Xia Ziking nodded. Even if you can see that there is a complete sentence behind it, it will take a while to distinguish the pros and cons. Wait, front and back. Xia Ziking reached out to pick up the sticky note and touched it. Sure enough, this piece of paper was specially processed. It looked the same, but it felt different. The front side was very smooth, while the back side was much rougher. You are really careful. Xia Ziking put the piece of paper back on the table with handcuffed hands, and smiled sideways at Zhou Ziyan, as expected of Ziyan. Zhou Ziyan couldn't believe that he worshipped so much. He responded slightly bluntly, this kind of special paper is very common in the secret room. If you are not distracted by the music, you will also find it. No way, art is life. Xia Ziking's hands were a little sore. He moved his shoulders and looked down at the paper. For some reason, the originally ethereal and clear music on the gramophone suddenly became sluggish. Strange lag, unpleasant. Your art looks a bit old. Zhou Ziyan rarely used a mocking tone. The stale music made his brain unable to concentrate, so he was about to walk over and turn off the music. At this time, Xia Ziking stood motionless, his eyes didn't know where to look, and he seemed to be in a daze. Wait a minute. The moment Zhou Ziyan put his hand on the tone arm, Xia Ziking called to stop, don't turn it off yet. What's wrong? Zhou Ziyan looked at him with some dissatisfaction, and found that Xia Ziking found a pen on the table and wrote something down on the previous piece of paper. Did he find anything? Zhou Ziyan slowly withdrew his hand, and began to listen to this strange discontinuous piece seriously. The stagnation in the music sounds almost irregular at first glance, sometimes there is a short stutter, and sometimes it lasts longer. But if you listen carefully, you will find that at the end of every 2 bars, the stuttering will stop for a few seconds, and then reappear, even the stuttering time is the same. Like some kind of cycle. Zhou Ziyan quickly realized that the beginning of each cycle was to repeat the password again. Long time freeze, short time freeze, short time freeze, short time freeze, music, short time freeze, long time freeze, a short time freeze, music, short card, music, long short music, long short long music. The long and short handover is Morse code. He stood in front of the phonograph and listened to a few bars. Xia Ziking, who was leaning over the desk just now, had straightened up, looked at the draft that he had just calculated, and finally walked to Zhou Ziyan's side. Have you solved it? He was a little surprised. After all, as far as he knew, Xia Ziking majored in art, so how could he solve the Morse code so quickly? Xia Ziking nodded, frowning slightly, walked to the mirror he had seen before, stared at it carefully for a while, and then said to Zhou Ziyan, stand farther away first. Zhou Ziyan was puzzled, but he still stood up a bit. He saw Xia Ziking take the tone arm away, and the music stopped abruptly. He was about to ask Xia Ziking what kind of information he got after decoding, but he was a step late. Xia Ziking took a step back with his right foot, put his handcuffed hands into fists in front of his chest, and raised his leg with a very skilled posture and movement. Remember the side kick. With a bang, the oval mirror suddenly shattered. He gently retracted his legs, and the light-reflecting fragments fell on the wooden cabinet and the floor, making a crackling sound. The moment it fell, the original appearance of the carved mirror frame finally appeared. A silver key is pasted into the grey chassis of the mirror frame. Please help me untie this. Xia Ziking turned his head to look at Zhou Ziyan, and stretched out his bound hands towards him. To be honest, Xia Ziking's intelligence was beyond Zhou Ziyan's imagination. Under this second of thinking, he was even considering whether to take the key as his own when he let down his vigilance, so as to use it as a way to blackmail Xia Ziking in the future. The most likely killer. But he finally gave up on this plan. Zhou Ziyan glanced at the wrists that were a little red from the handcuffs, and felt that his thoughts were really disgusting. If he plots against him later, he can only consider himself unlucky. Zhou Ziyan stepped forward to take off the key. The props team really worked hard. The key was stuck so firmly that it took him a lot of effort to take it off smoothly. Xia Ziking obediently stretched out his hands to Zhou Ziyan, watching him lower his head and uncuff him. This scene gave him great aesthetic enjoyment. Zhou Ziyan's straight nose bridge and delicately angled eye corners look more refined from such a low angle. It is a kind of delicate sculpture full of male hormones. The beautiful lines of brow bone and mountain root are connected and raised, like the silence falling in the wind mountains. His lowered head and his focused eyes made Xia Ziking involuntarily think of Paul and Rodin's sculpture The Kiss. If it wasn't for the recording of a reality show, Xia Ziking would definitely come to his ear and say something. Your face is really suitable for kissing. All right. The handcuffs were successfully opened. Zhou Ziyan, who had fulfilled his mission, raised his eyes and met Xia Ziking's straightforward eyes without any precautions. He subconsciously frowned, looked away and coughed, and swung the loose handcuffs with his wrist. In the palm of my hand, I put it on the wooden cabinet beside me with a snap. Xia Ziking smiled, touched his wrist and said thank you softly, remembering Zhou Ziyan's expression when he just finished solving it. You also found out that it's Morse code, right? Zhou Ziyan nodded, and put his hand into his pocket to check the time, but I can't remember the specific correspondence of the Morse code. It's a bit difficult to solve, so I can only make up. Xia Ziking played the music he had paused before, and explained along with the music. At first there was a long pause, then 3 short pauses, and the music resumed after the short pause. Long, short, short, short corresponds to the letter B, followed by a short, long, short, which is the letter R. The music continued to play mixed with the inserted stuttering sound. Short the letter E. Short, long letter A. Long short long letter K. Break 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 the mirror. Before Xia Ziking could finish explaining the next 2 words, Zhou Ziyan had already given the answer. That's right. Xia Ziking smiled. This smile seemed to be different from the previous one, with a hearty feeling. Probably an illusion, Zhou Ziyan thought. Why are you so familiar with Morse code? Zhou Ziyan walked over and turned off the music, picked up the vinyl record that he hadn't observed carefully before, and narrowed his eyes slightly. When I was in junior high school, my Olympiad teacher said it. I found it very interesting. I used it to pass the answers to others during the exam. I didn't use it when I went to the liberal arts class in high school. I just remembered it after reacting for a while. Xia Ziking, the toe of his leather shoe lightly touched the ground, but the program group set it up too difficult. If you don't happen to know this knowledge, you can't solve it at all. Actually, they are very thoughtful. Zhou Ziyan handed the vinyl record to Xia Ziking, with the name of the sweet mirror written on it. Just now when I was putting together notes, you played this piano piece. Those who are familiar with the music can directly hear that this is the mirror suite, and then think of the mirror next to the gramophone. If you don't know it, you can find it by watching vinyl records, so it is inevitable to think of the mirror. If you want to think of breaking a mirror, Xia Ziking thought of the bookmark in the previous book. Whatever I touch, it will be broken. Zhou Ziyan nodded. I guess, the fragments of the note are also one of the hints. So the program team arranged several ideas, and you chose the most direct one. But the intellectual cost is the highest. Xiaoziking shrugged slightly, but compared with the efficiency of the association effect, mathematics is much more accurate and faster. Zhou Ziyan wondered how an art student could be so good at mathematics. At this moment, Xiaoziking had already focused on the sticky note that he had put together before. That garbled code should also be a set of passwords, but it may be another solution. He walked over and picked up the piece of paper, maybe here hiding the code to our door. This idea coincides with Zhou Ziyan, but apart from this note, he always feels that there are many other information in the room, but he can't find a good way to distinguish which is effective information and which is interference information. Once again, the two met the post-it note that was broken and restored again. Xiaoziking flipped the sticky note to the side with the words written on it, looked at it carefully, took out the bookmark from the book, and suddenly said something that didn't sound very effective at the moment. Don't you think the handwriting on the two pieces of paper is different? Zhou Ziyan also noticed this point. The writing on the bookmark looks more majestic, like a man's handwriting, while the handwriting on the sticky note is much more delicate. Although it is not a huge difference, judging from the degree of retractability of the pen, it is indeed not. Words from the same person. He pointed to the bookmark. I think this is the handwriting of the owner of the study. In fact, Xiaoziking agrees with this point of view, but for the sake of program effect and audience acceptance, he still asked very conscientiously, then what if the owner of the room borrowed this book? The bookmarks in it are very probably not his own. Zhou Ziyan shook his head, then pointed to a row of bookcases next to him. The third row is counted from left to right. The first 6 books are all in the same series as this novel, and this one is the finished book. Except for this series, there are many other series of books on the bookcase, and I don't think a collector would borrow books to read, let alone the finished one. Xiaoziking made a very appreciative fan expression. Wow, it's a shame that our family Hung doesn't act in criminal investigation dramas. Our family Hung? Although this way of expression Zhou Ziyan has become commonplace on Weibo, which is flooded with fans, but coming out of this person's mouth, his always excellent expression management almost lost control. Seeing the unbelievable admiration on Xiaoziking's face, Zhou Ziyan couldn't help but retort in his heart. It's a shame that you don't act. After all, it was on a show, so it's not good to be too indifferent to the hot face of this fan in front of him. Zhou Ziyan coughed and said sullenly, not necessarily not acting. For some reason, Xiaoziking felt that Zhou Ziyan was a little cute at this moment. He shook his head in his heart, he must have lost his head. Seeing that Xiaoziking's feet were about to step on the fragments of the vase that he had broken into pieces at the beginning, Zhou Ziyan couldn't help reaching out and pulling his arm. Be careful. Xiaoziking also reacted, and looked down. Ha, so the vase was broken in the first place, I almost forgot, the theme of our room is probably fragments. Xiaoziking vaguely felt that something was wrong when he said this casually. If Zhou Ziyan's theory of broken association just now was really a series of clues designed in advance by the program group, then shouldn't the vase, which is also fragile, be broken? Clues that can be obtained later? Zhou Ziyan also seemed to have gained inspiration from Xiaoziking's words, and the two of them squatted down almost at the same time, with a tacit understanding. On the ground are broken porcelain vases and a bouquet of white chrysanthemums scattered on the ground. Xiaoziking used white chrysanthemum branches to poke through the broken objects on the ground, and found a paper note rolled into a thin tube. There is indeed a clue. He couldn't help complaining in his heart that the writer of the escape room script was really thoughtful, with so many clues hidden in the corners. If he didn't think of the theme of fragments, the vase probably wouldn't be broken. No, not right. He quickly denied himself in his heart. Zhou Ziyan said suddenly, so the program team tied us up with rope, but didn't set up any sharp weapons, only a vase as a decoration, and put it by my hand, just to let us smash him. His thinking actually synchronized with his own. Xiaoziking was a little surprised, but still quickly responded, well, that should be the case, but our attention was diverted from the beginning, and we didn't find any clues in the vase. It's like a snake game, no matter which one you start to eat or what the moving route is, you have to eat all the fruits that existed when the game was initialized, otherwise it will be game over. He suddenly admired the screenwriter a little. He is a smart person. He didn't frame this program as a game that must be followed step by step, otherwise the replayability would be too much reduced. The steps are not important, and the order is also irrelevant. Even the problem-solving ideas are set in multiple ways, and a dark character like Killer is added to the escape room, which suddenly turns a pure decryption game into a mode of IQ warfare and psychological warfare. Interesting. The two opened the note and wrote a small poem on it. We were one. Destiny pulled you away from my body, from my bones, my flesh and my heart, and abruptly put these meaningless organs together. I was buried together with you who were dismantled and reconstructed together. Buried under this fence with lush roses. Only Reedy's assembly, give you back to me, give me back to you. From top to bottom, connected to each other. Everything can regain meaning. It looked like a Gothic poem, but Xiaoziking always felt that something was wrong. He turned the paper over and found something written on it. To you he wrote to S2, there must be a reason. Xiaoziking can't be sure about other things, but this is certain. The only rule that can be found in this game is not to let go of any unreasonable details. Zhou Ziyan kept staring with his brows, as if he was seriously thinking about this little poem. The phone rang suddenly. Their thoughts were interrupted, they took out their phones, and a new message appeared on the screen. Note that the first player escapes from the original room and enters the other player's room. It's so fast. Xiaoziking looked around, put the phone back with a smile, and looked innocent and thankful, but it seems that he didn't enter our room. If this person is the killer, randomly enter a certain room, the show is horrible. Zhou Ziyan asked back, what if he is an ordinary player and enters the killer's room? Xiaoziking turned his face to face him, chose an angle that could avoid the closest close-up shots, raised his hand, and covered the wheat as if he was tidying up his neckline, lazily raised the corners of his mouth, and showed a smile that completely reproduced his bad nature. The export type joked. Isn't it more exciting to have a sheep go into the mouth of a tiger? The author has something to say. Zhou Ziyan, you are an art student, how can you be so good at math? Uncle, the genes of the Xia family, good looks, tall, good at math. Your friend Xiaozhigzu refused to be Q. Zhou Ziyan clearly felt the changes in Xiaoziking at this moment. Before, he was lazily staying out of the matter, but when he heard that a player broke through the room, he immediately threw himself into the game. But he also knew that Xiaoziking's behavior was not because of his desire to win, but because he wanted to leave here to watch the excitement. To make the muddy water even more chaotic is probably his real purpose. Don't you think this poem is strange? Xiaoziking found a marker pen from somewhere, and drew a horizontal line on the last few lines of the poem. Only Reedy's assembled, give you back to me, give me back to you. From top to bottom, connected to each other. Everything can regain meaning. He took out the sticky note that Zhou Ziyan had spelled together at the beginning, with a string of garbled characters written on the front. I think this poem hints at the decoding method of this code. Zhou Ziyan nodded in agreement, and read the poem carefully in his heart. We were one. Destiny pulled you away from my body, from my bones, my flesh and my heart, and abruptly put these meaningless organs together. I was buried together with you who were dismantled and reconstructed together. Buried under this fence with lush roses. Only Reedy's assembly, give you back to me, give me back to you. From top to bottom, connected to each other. Everything can regain meaning. It used to be one body, separated, put together, buried together one after the other. He couldn't help but read out in a deep voice, buried under this fence with lush roses. Fence, fence, fence. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed in my mind. Railfence cipher. /fence cipher. The two blurted out at the same time, and then looked at each other in surprise. Xiaoziking laughed first. It seems that I am really an idol. I have a perfect understanding. Zhou Ziyan sneered in his heart. Sorry, he didn't want to be followed by such a person at all. Having said that, Xiaoziking's reaction speed still surprised him. How do you know the password for the fence? Zhou Ziyan asked. Xiaoziking replied casually, my nephew is in IT, and I studied a little cryptography with him for a while. Your nephew? Zhou Ziyan frowned and looked at Xiaoziking. Where are you from, old goblin? He didn't say anything, and didn't really believe what Xiaoziking said. He leaned over and grabbed the pen he found just now to decode the code. Xiaoziking turned the little poem to the other side and saw 2YOU written on it. He smiled and said, actually, the clues of the program group are really obvious. The 2 here is not 2, it means that the original state of the password is divided into 2 columns, right? N. Zhou Ziyan counted the long string of garbled digits with his fingers, found the middle one, drew a vertical line, and disassembled them. Although he knew that Xiaoziking understood the decoding process, in order to ensure the program the audience can also understand this process. Zhou Ziyan explained, the first half of this poem is the process of encryption, and the beginning of only Reedy's assembly is a reminder of the decoding process. According to the 2 written on the back, the garbled characters evenly divided into 2 groups, with 7 letters in each group. Pgohudien nerd return you to me, return me to you should mean dismantling and restoring the letters in the group. While speaking, Zhou Ziyan retranscribed the 2 separated groups, aligning the 2 lines. Pgohudien nerd Zhou Ziyan lowered his head, and while reading the penultimate sentence in the poem, from top to bottom, they are connected to each other. Starting from the letter P in the first line, he drew a line with a pen, first pointing to the A in the second line, and then with a turn of the pen, the line loops back to the G, and so on, until the rippling line penetrates every letter and reaches the last letter D. Write it down in the order of the lines. Zhou Ziyan half bent down and carefully copied the final answer. Page 100. Page 100. The 100th page. Xiaoziking picked up the unbelievably thick book next to him, and turned to the 100th page. The entire page was printed with words that looked like ants, and he saw 4 numbers on the 42nd line. I only live because of my desire, for this fiery cliff, if possible, at the moment when my desire burns out, I will be the 1414th rose in the sea of roses in your heart, no more, no less, just make that one. 1414. Xiaoziking put down the book, walked to the front of the study, and entered these 4 numbers on the password lock screen on the door. The combination lock glows blue, flashes 3 times, and finally displays a green message on the screen. The password is correct. Xiaoziking tried to push the door, only to hear a click, and the door lock was unlocked. Xiaoziking, who originally wanted to slip away by himself, noticed the close-up shot on the door lock, so he turned around and said to Zhou Ziyan with a smile, we can go out now, let's go. Zhou Ziyan, who was leaning against the desk, gave him a meaningful look, and finally put his hands in his coat pockets and walked towards him. A new beep came from the speaker. Note that 2 players have now escaped from the original room and entered the other player's room. Is the alliance still established? Zhou Ziyan asked suddenly. Xiaoziking smiled and pushed open the door, of course, if my use value has not been drained. The word squeezed out is so subtle that Zhou Ziyan didn't even feel that he was being molested by Xiaoziking, and followed him out of the original room unconsciously. The structure of this house is very strange. There is no corridor-like partition between the rooms. Open the door of your own room and directly enter the new room. The people in the room were busy doing something, when they heard the wall behind them, at least he always thought it was the door of the wall being opened all of a sudden, he couldn't help being startled and his back trembled. Adhering to the original intention of shaping the character design, Xiaoziking took the initiative to greet the original owner of the room with a smile. Hi, we are the players who escaped from our room just now, you should have received a message from the program team. The man was wearing a creamy yellow overcoat, and his dyed light brown hair looked very fluffy. When he heard the voice, he turned around, and his pretty face suddenly showed a sigh of relief when he saw Zhou Ziyan. Facial expression, "Ah Ziyan, great that it's you." He smiled at Xia Ziking again, "Hello, hello. Hey, aren't you the one who was recently? The one on Weibo 2 days ago." Xia Ziking reported his family name very considerately, Xia Ziking. The other party looked like he was about to introduce himself, and Xia Ziking immediately spoke for him, "Shang Sirui, I like the song of your group very much." Shang Sirui is the face of the popular group High Five. Shang Sirui had worked with him in a movie before, but it was just a cameo role. Although Xia Ziking only talks about scenes, and he doesn't like listening to the songs of this kind of idol boy group, but their popularity is still good in the circle of young people, especially this Shang Sirui. With his handsome face and Yu's confused personality has become a popular top member in the group. Really? Shang Sirui laughed twice, "Hey, you guys are amazing, you escaped so quickly, I've been tossing around here for a long time and haven't come up with anything useful. Hey, I'm surprised now, why did my agent answer such a difficult announcement for me?" Xia Ziking almost didn't laugh out loud. He's an idol anyway, and when he opened his mouth, it was like talking about cross-talk. No wonder the netizens complained about his mouth. The two are always faster. Zhou Ziyan walked to Shang Sirui's side to check his current progress. Xia Ziking realized that Zhou Ziyan was really tall and his shoulders were wider than Shang Sirui's when the two of them stood together, which made Shang Sirui, who was originally above the standard figure of the men's team, look petite. If he remembers correctly, these two people seem to have a CP. The general attacker in the entertainment circle pretends to be honest and does not deceive me. Although both Shang Sirui and Zhou Ziyan have countless fans, their looks are completely different in two styles. Shang Sirui's facial features are light and full of youthful looks, looking like a high school boy, while Zhou Ziyan is the full face and deep facial features were once mistaken for mixed blood. For Xia Ziking, of course, the latter is more exciting. The author has something to say, cryptography knowledge popularization. In fact, I have tried my best to explain the decryption process in the simplest and easy-to-understand language, Zhou Ziyan's words. Many readers may have persuaded 2333 to quit after seeing the word password, which is actually very interesting, really. If you are interested, you can take a look at the popular science below. Without mathematical knowledge, it is a very simple operation. The garbled code pgohudien that appeared in these two chapters belongs to a fence password divided into two columns. I will not talk about the concept and use the password in the text as an example. The first half of the poem that appears in the article, I wrote it blindly, let's call it SHIBA, is the encryption process, so let's make a one-to-one correspondence. We were one. The original plain code is pagin 100, remove the spaces to become one pagin 100. Destiny pulled you away from my body, from my bones, my flesh and my heart, and abruptly put these meaningless organs together. How to extract, because the column is 2, so divide it 2 by 2 to become pagin 100, a total of 7 groups, bones, flesh, heart, etc., and then extract the first character, pgohud, of each group and put it in one pile. The second character, nerd, is placed in one pile, it becomes 2 piles. I was buried together with you who were dismantled and reconstructed together. Put together the 2 piles of letter sequences obtained just now, one in front and one in back, and you will get the password pgohudien. So this is the encryption method of the fence password, and we will give another example, such as encrypting eloveu. If we encrypt in 3 columns, first remove the space to become eloveu, and then separate 3 by 3, eloveu, then the first letter of each part is grouped, ivo, the second letter is grouped, leu, and the third letter is grouped, oi, finally put them together end to end, ivo dang dang dang, the encryption is complete. Take it to confess, have you learned the fence code? In fact, the passwords used to set up mobile phones and some accounts every day are very good for the decoding part. Follow the steps in the text. First, divide the garbled characters into 2 columns, string them together with wavy lines on one line, and write them in order.